तुझसे भी दिल फरेब हैं गम रोजगार के, दुनिया ने तेरी याद से बेगाना कर दिया, तुझसे भी दिल फरेब हैं गम रोजगार के. So I am with one Rozgar today because of which previously I was supposed to leave tomorrow, but now I would be leaving this evening itself because I am required to be in Delhi in the best interests of the administration in the country. So sorry for that I will be missing most of the fun here, most of the inspiring singing of my old friends like Tipaniya ji, and most of the other stimulating discussions. I am supposed to talk about my personal and political Kabir. See, I came to Delhi as a student to JNU way back in 1977. Before that, I was reasonably exposed to Kabir. I am not one of those who discovered Kabir in MA Hindi literature or due to some politically correct fashionable statement or film or slogan. I am one of those humble Indians, Hindi speaking Indians, who grow up with Tulsidas and Kabir and Mirabai, who learn a Sakhi or two of Kabir before they learn writing their names. I am one of those humble Indians. So I was reasonably exposed to Kabir even before I joined MA as a student in JNU. But I started studying Kabir and other Bhakt poets in a more academic and systematic way only as a student of literature. And the question which I have been asking myself for so many years now, that how my engagement with Kabir became more than academic. It also became, over the last 30 years or so, it became more than merely academic. It also became something more than merely political. In a very deep sense, my engagement with Kabir has turned into a very, very personal experience. So the topic Kabir, political and personal, in fact, gives me an opportunity to ask the question to myself, and I don't know whether I am going to live up to my image, cultivated my friends like Swabnam, that I tickle or I provoke. I do not intend to provoke anybody. It so happens that people get provoked. That's none of my fault. So I just want to ask this question to myself, and probably in the company of so many friends, I'll get some opportunity to reflect on this question once again. When I started reading Kabir seriously, and this I have been doing for the last 20 or 25 years after my MA, I did my PhD work on Kabir and then went on writing, thinking, traveling, meeting Kabir Panthis, critics of Kabir, admirers of Kabir and all that. I have been always wondering that, who is this man, Kabir? And I sometimes find him resembling myself so much, and yet I fail to recognize him. The question which I have been asking is, why? Why I fail to recognize Kabir? Why I want him to be confined to a certain set of situations? How it happens that when Kabir is ridiculing or caricaturing a Pandit or a Maulana, I prefer to identify with Kabir and not with the Maulana who is being caricatured. And quite possibly, I have many things in common with the Maulana who is being caricatured. I might have many things in common with Pandit who is being caricatured. I am part of the culture which goes on producing bookish knowledge in this country and throughout the world, without bordering to associate with the life out there. Even in a university like JNU, which is known to be a very progressive, democratic and forward-looking university, I do not think someone like Pradhan Singh Tipania performed in JNU before, I think, 2003 or 2002. Nobody knew about Pradhan Singh Tipania before 2002. And we all were studying a lot of Kabir and Bhakti tradition. We were studying Kabir through the printed word, not through the living word. Because Kabir in the universities is one thing, Kabir is in the political life is another thing, Kabir is in the life of people like Tipania, and Kabir in the life of so many Kabir Panthis spread from Bihar to Gujarat is quite another. And we the academics are hardly bothered with any of the readings and images of Kabir which are relevant to so many people. So this has been one question in my mind. Why? How we have failed, how I have failed to see someone who resembles me so much. Kabir resembles me not because I am unique or I am great or I am a prophet in the making, but because he is an extremely ordinary person. It's remarkable to note that Kabir never claimed to be a dharma guru. I can say this with some authority. Kabir never claimed to be an avatar of any god or god with capital G. Kabir always claimed to be a humble Julaha from Banaras. And that's it. And sometimes he was quite ironical and satirical by referring to his social origins. आए हमारे कहा करोगी हम तो जात कमीना, तहाँ जाओ जहाँ अगर पाठ पटंबर अगर चंदन घसलीना, आए हमारे कहा करोगी हम तो जात कमीना. So he was quite aware of the fact that he is supposed to belong to a quote-unquote Kameen Jat. He always claimed to be a very humble person. And with this humbleness, he also claimed to be a person who dared asking questions. This is true of any one of us. Only if we allow our real, to use the Kabirian expression, if we allow our Sahaj self to speak out. Sahaj literally means something which is given to you at your birth. And you allow it, you do not allow it to speak up. And that is why this question becomes pertinent. I also realized over last so many years that Kabir also is not unique in the sense of being an aberration. He is unique precisely because of being situated, because of being a very striking presence in a continuous tradition. It is not as if Kabir one fine morning dropped from the sky and then nothing happened. Before Kabir, there was a living tradition of interrogation. There was a living tradition of emphasizing love as the primary moving force of life. And this tradition continued after Kabir. In our university curriculum, we do not even know the names of people like Darya Sahib of Bihar, or Paltu Das of Awadh, or Akha of Gujarat, and people like that. So Kabir is important or Kabir is unique, not because of being something out of this world, but because precisely of being very much of this world. And also part of being a continuous tradition which continues even today. I have been wondering, do we, the modern admirers of Kabir, really try to understand? I am not saying appreciate. It's not necessary to appreciate. It's not necessary to agree with everything even Kabir stood for. I do not agree with many things he stood for. But do we really try to understand the totality of Kabir? This is a question which becomes pertinent, particularly when we talk of Kabir as political. Kabir is sometimes projected as the great champion of Hindu-Muslim unity. To put it quite bluntly, the Hindu-Muslim unity as we know it today implies acceptance of things as they are, without being critical of anything. And certainly without being critical of a tradition which is not yours. I, being a Hindu, I am not expected to be critical of anything of Islam. X, being a Muslim, is not expected to be critical of anything Hindu. And then we continue to be united in our acceptance of things as they are. Any reading of Kabir would reveal that in this sense he never stood for the so-called Hindu-Muslim or Hindu-Isai or Hindu-Sikh or Sikh-Isai unity. Never. He actually stood for an interrogation of all kind of ritualism, all kind of formalism, including his own. In fact, in one of his poems, he comments on people like himself. Tipaniya ji would recollect that, Sakhi sabde keh keh bhule, Atam khabar nahi jana re. This is people like Kabir himself. Nirgun Panthis. Sakhi sabde is categorically associated with Nirgun Panthis. So even those people who claim to be Nirgun Panthis, even if they are not aware of certain things, Kabir will have no hesitation in critiquing them with equal vehemence. So friends, Kabir's criticism of Hinduism or Islam or any religious tradition available to him, including Nath Panthis and in an indirect way even the Buddhist and Jain tradition, to my mind actually reflects a search for the fundamental connection with cosmos, the fundamental connection with universe without the mediation of organized religion. That is what Swami was talking about, is spirituality without religion. Let me, however, add, spirituality is an extremely inadequate translation of what I mean. In Hindi, I use the expression adhyatma, and spiritual is an extremely inadequate translation of adhyatma. Adhyatma in Indian tradition does not mean things pertaining to the other world. It certainly does not mean the spirits with whom you could talk through the help of a planchette. It does not mean that at all in Indian tradition. Adhyatma etymologically means to go beyond yourself. In Gita, in the 8th chapter of Gita, the question is put to Lord Krishna, what is Adhyatma, what is Brahma? Please tell me. The answer which is given by Krishna in Gita is actually quintessential understanding of the entire Indian tradition of the notion of Adhyatma. Gita makes Krishna say, Svabhavo Adhyatmam Uchayate. Your very nature is known as Adhyatma. And this quite interestingly takes my mind to two 19th century European philosophers. One is Feuerbach, another would be rather unexpected to many of his admirers, Karl Marx. You don't associate Karl Marx with anything spiritual. But that is again our problem, not Karl Marx's. In 1844, Karl Marx wrote certain things which were published very late, in the early 20th century only, under the title Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844. Marx was under the influence of Feuerbach those days, heavily influenced by Feuerbach. And in that manuscript, Marx makes some observations which are strikingly similar to this definition that your very nature is spiritual. Svabhavo Adhyatmam Uchayate. Marx says in that manuscript that just as labor gets alienated, your own nature, your physical activity gets alienated and becomes labor, becomes a commodity to be sold and purchased in the market. Similarly, your specie essence, the essence of your being human, becomes alienated in the form of religion. and becomes a commodity, becomes an activity imposed upon you from an outside agency, divine or diabolical. This is Karl Marx in Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts, 1844. Again, in the same manuscript, Marx goes on to point out that the essential difference between animal and human is precisely this, that human being is conscious of being, animal is not conscious of his own being. Therefore, the relation with cosmos on part of animal is organic but unconscious. The human relation with cosmos is inorganic because it is part of cosmos and yet aware of the difference. And therefore this relation, to use Marx's own expression, is spiritual. And it is this spiritual essence which gets alienated through the agency of organized religion, and man gets alienated from his own nature. This was a revelation for me. I read economic and, you see, when I was a Marxist, I never bothered to read economic and philosophical manuscripts. Because when you follow a certain ideology, you do not bother to read the seminal texts. The interpretations given by the authorized interpreters are sufficient. If you are a good Hindu, you should never bother to read Gita yourself. Whatever Swamiji says is fine. Similarly, if you are a good Kabir Panthi, never bother to read Bijak yourself. Just follow what Tipaniyaji says, because he is the Guru, so whatever he is saying must be true of Bijak. So similarly, when I was a Marxist, formally, I never bothered to read economic and philosophical manuscripts. When I read it, I realized that here is the crux, the key to understand not only Kabir, I repeat, not only Kabir, but many like him, and not only in India, but throughout the experience of human civilization. People like Kabir are making the fundamental statement through their poetic praxis. I reiterate the word, poetic praxis. People like Kabir are making essential point through their poetic praxis. The point is this, very simply, that you cannot be spiritual if you are not at the same time human in the sense of being laborious. Labor and spirituality. Your physical and mental activity, they must complement each other. None is the alternative of the other. And this comes out so clearly in Kabir. I am not at all giving any gloss on Kabir. Basically, the point he is making throughout his poetic praxis is this, that in the first place, you have certain universal notion of values. Certain values are universal, in spite of the fact that because of the colonial modernity and because of various problems of modernity, the expression, the term universal has become universally suspect these days. The moment you talk of something universal, you are being, something rather unacceptable. In these days of postmodern identity politics, nothing is universal. But I think there is something universal. The very fact that I am concerned with something taking place in Middle East, I am not a Palestinian. I have never visited Gaza and I do not think I will ever visit Gaza in my life. But there is something which pains me here. That is universal. And it is in this sense that I reiterate that Kabir and many like him. My friend David Lorenzen has written about a singer in 1930s, a Christian singer, singing in the churches of South Carolina, Blind Willie. He was blind, so he was called Blind Willie. And David Lorenzen has actually compared the compositions of Blind Willie with Kabir, line by line. And they seem to be translation of each other. God is not there on the pulpit. He is out there, outside the church. Go and find him. This is Blind Willie singing in the 30s in South Carolina. And he obviously did not even hear of God. And many like him. So friends, one point which I have been trying to remind myself, and as a matter of fact, when I speak in the mood or with the disposition when I am speaking today, I am almost speaking to each one of you individually. I am not at all addressing a gathering as a scholar or whatever. I am not a scholar at all. But when I am talking to you, essentially I feel I am talking to myself. Or in that sense, I am talking to nobody in particular. I am asking these questions not to you. I am not inviting you to do any reflection. I am not inviting you to get trickled or provoked or angry with whatever I am saying. I would in fact, on the contrary, invite you to forget whatever nonsense I am talking about. But the point I am trying to make is very simple and realized and realizable by each one of us, that there are certain universal concerns, universal anxieties, and those anxieties and their totality defines my existence. Kabir has a most poignant line, which I think expresses the fundamental concern of his as a poet. भीतर कहूं तो जगमय लाजे, बाहर कहूं तो झूठा लो, मैं कई विधि कथों गंभीरा. If I describe him as residing within myself, then I am dismissing the existence of everything which is outside. So I cannot say this. If I say he is outside, he is residing outside, then I know I am denying my own experience. I know I am telling a lie. So bahar kahun to jhootha lo. How to describe that indescribable? Bhitar bahar sabad nirantar, ehi vidhi kathon gambhira lo. The profound truth which I want to convey to you is this, that he actually resides in the continuum of inside and outside. In our own idiom, in our own political idiom, we could say that the profundity of our moral concerns actually reside in the continuum of personal and political. It's very easy to condemn every political thing or every discourse of power or everything connected with power. The point is that am I part of that discourse and that structure in my personal capacity or not? Personally speaking, it was not very difficult not to go this evening. I could have certainly avoided. I could have certainly given some very, very fitting excuse. After all, seats are not available. Indian Airlines is to be blamed. So there is no problem. They could have managed somehow. But then that is the problem of continuum. If something is to be done, if some moral position is to be taken, it has to be taken consistently both in the realm of Bhitar and of Bahar. Most of our young friends get attracted to Kabir because of his supposedly iconoclastic views. Yes, of course, he was very iconoclastic. And he was very aggressive, and sometimes he could express things in a most satirical and almost in a manner which would hurt the sentiments of all and sundry in today's India. And sometimes I feel very, very happy for Kabir. And I thank God for Kabir that he was not writing in 20th or 21st century India. In the medieval India, which was characterized by backwardness, by all kind of sectarianism, all kind of violence, Kabir was at worst forced to leave Banaras for some time. Had he been writing in 1990 or 2009, he would have met a more severe punishment for hurting the sentiments. So sometimes I feel very happy for Kabir that he died 500 years ago. What actually attracts most of us to him is his so-called iconoclasm. This iconoclasm would not have been possible at all in the absence of a very, very humble search for love. Kabir is basically searching for love. Kabir's fundamental concern is love, not demolition. He should not be read as some kind of demolition expert or bulldozer let loose. He criticizes people quite categorically, absolutely. But if you read him with totality, he is a poet which brings tears to your eyes. Because of his yearning, because of his agony. And what he is looking for? He calls it Ram, he calls it Govind, he calls it Karim, he calls it Madhav, Keshav, whatnot. All the names of God employed by Kabir in his poems are actually nothing but an attempt to name love and nothing else. And while I read Kabir, I am always reminded, in fact that was another remarkable discovery or route to discovery. Roland Barthes, the famous structuralist philosopher, French philosopher, is known as the father of what we call, one of the fathers of what we call postmodernism and post-structuralism today. And this man, Roland Barthes, has written a most moving book. In fact, it's not a book. It's a kind of fragments. It's a kind of jottings which has been published, put together. And it is called The Lover's Discourse. And the opening sentence of that book really strikes you like a bolt. The opening sentence of the book is, the lover's discourse is spoken by many in this world, but warranted by none. Everybody wants to talk of love. Nobody wants to hear the talk of love. And nobody wants to act on the talk of love. Everybody wants to talk of love. I love my motherland, I love my religion, I love my faith, I love my ideology. And therefore I am willing to die and I am willing to kill. Sorry. So this discourse, which is spoken by many and warranted by none, I please request you, go through Kabir in his own words, and his most moving English translation is available by our common friend Linda, which is also important because Linda is the only Kabir scholar so far who has taken Kabir the poet seriously. Otherwise, Kabir has been reduced to a social reformer, a revolutionary. Sometimes I feel that the revolutionaries of 21st century do not have sufficient faith in their own resources. Therefore, they sometimes turn Jesus into a revolutionary, they sometimes turn somebody else into a revolutionary, and sometimes they turn Kabir into a revolutionary. If you want to do revolution, you should do it on the basis of your own resources, instead of appropriating the popular figures from the past. Anyway. So, if you read Kabir through translation or Kabir in his original, basically he is the poet of life. And if you read, you will find his logic is again very simple. It's Sahaj logic, the commonsensical logic. Common sense, not in the philosophical sense of word, but in a very general sense of word. If I can relate with my Ram through love, if my Ram has no problem in talking to me with love or through love, why the hell in this world I cannot relate with my fellow human being in the same way? That is the fundamental question Kabir poses to himself. That is the most fundamental question. If you look at his work, it will be very, very difficult, or to my mind, in fact, it will be impossible to make a distinction between a spiritual and political Kabir. Spiritual in the sense of adhyatmic. When I say the word spiritual, please first translate that into your mind in Hindi, Sanskrit, Kannada or whatever into adhyatmic. Don't take it in the sense of in the sense in which it is It is used in contemporary English. So this is, to my mind, my way of approaching Kabir, my way of reaching Kabir, that you cannot really make a distinction between spiritual and political. You cannot make a distinction between universal and specific. You can be conscious of the specific manifestations of universal. You could be conscious of political movements, but you cannot say, as I find many friends telling me, that look here, we are interested in Kabir only so far as he is critical of Hindu bigotry or Muslim bigotry or of caste order or of Brahmanism or Brahmin supremacy and all that, and rest of Kabir we are not concerned with. Of course you can do that, I mean, nobody can stop you from doing that. But I think you would be doing a bit of injustice to the poetic praxis of Kabir. Last point, friends, I would like to make is about this poetic praxis itself. You see, we have to distinguish between those who want to use poetry or any creative expression in order to create a political message. And such people also have certainly created great poetry, no doubt about that. But then there are people whose political or social message is almost a byproduct of their poetic, their creative concerns. They are not doing it deliberately. They are not doing with a kind of predetermined agenda. Kabir is not criticizing all kind of organized religions in order to create a religion himself, in order to create a separate panth himself. I am sure Tipaniya ji will not agree with me, but as a student of history, I have to say that Kabir Panth was established at least 100 years after Kabir's death. Kabir never established any panth. In fact, in one of the most moving biographies of Kabir, written by Anant Das at the turn of 16th century, which is supposed to be the earliest biography of Kabir, Anant Das records an incident which is indicative of Kabir's nature. Because of his poetic performances and as Anant Das informs us, because of his miracles, Kabir became very popular, very revered in the city of Banaras. And people used to throng his residence throughout the day. And he got fed up. He did not get sufficient time for his weaving profession and sufficient time for composing poetry or sufficient time for having dialogue with his Ram. He got fed up with the popularity. He was getting a lot of press, so he was not very happy with it. So how to get rid of it? Anant Das informs us that Kabir took some water in a bottle and joined the company of the most famous, most well-known prostitute of the town, took her along and wandered around the city of Banaras throughout the day, behaving like a drunkard. By the evening, the entire town was convinced that, look here, here is a rascal whom we thought to be a godly man. And people stopped bothering Kabir, and Kabir was extremely happy after that. So such a man is the most unlikely candidate for establishing a cult or sect or whatever. He was not, and that is why to my mind he could speak the truth. You see, I sometimes realize that if you are too popular, you cannot speak the truth. If you have a following to maintain, you cannot speak many truths. If you have a position to maintain, I cannot speak, you cannot speak many truths. I cannot speak many truths today which I could have spoken 2 years before. This is as simple as that. And Kabir realized it in his own way. Friends, if you read Kabir as a poet, you would realize that he talks about poetry himself. He talks about poetry. Upadesh is only a byproduct of his engagement with his Ram. He is basically trying to talk to his Ram. He is basically trying to live out the idea of love in his relationship with Ram and in his relationship with world. And whatever comes out has a certain component which is attractive to us because we are beset with some problems in which we find Kabir can be used as an associate or as a tool. Let me repeat, I have nothing against that. My only point is that please do not reduce Kabir only to a social reformer or only to a prop in a political activity. Kabir is, and any poet for that matter, is much bigger and much complex entity than that. Kabir makes some very interesting moral statements as well, which are the statements of his self-confidence and which are the statements of his method. I would just like to quote two Sakhis, to read two Sakhis to you, and that's it. One is about his understanding of his poetry and his bhakti and his social location and his social vocation. In one of his Sakhis he says, Pinjar prem prakasya, antar bhaya ujas, mukh kasturi mehmahi, bani futi bas. I had illumination of love within, and it illuminates my outside as well. It makes my words, my poetry, as fragrant as the musk. So it is the love which has made it possible. Pinjar prem prakasya, antar bhaya ujas, mukh kasturi mehmahi, bani futi bas. The second Sakhi I would like to read before you is about his notion of relationship between him and his God. As you know, we are supposed to follow God, we are supposed to worship God, and we are supposed to placate God in many ways. Here is a person who says in his very humble, confident, and almost defiant way, Kabir man nirmal bhaya, jaise Ganga neer. My mind has become as pure as the water of Ganga. Kabir man nirmal bhaya, jaise Ganga neer, piche laga hari fire, kehet Kabir, Kabir. I do not go after God anymore, He comes after me. I do not say Ram Ram or Hari Hari or Krishna Krishna or whatever. He says Kabir, Kabir. Because I have turned my mind as pure as Ganga Jal. Kabir man nirmal bhaya, jaise Ganga neer, piche laga hari fire, kehet Kabir, Kabir. Friends, I have great faith that all of us, if we take it seriously and strive hard, I am absolutely sure, in personal as well as in political realms of my life and my activity, all of us can force God to follow after. Only thing is that we turn our minds as pure as Ganga Jal. Ganga Jal, not of today, but of 15th century. Thank you very much.
So what, according to you, would be the most relevant teachings and messages of Kabir which are relevant to all of us today, even today's age?
Interrogate everything, including yourself.
One of the points you made was that Kabir did not want to found any sector. But what surprises me a little bit is, even after him, like for instance, Nanak's followers established Sikhism, no actual religion as such has been established. What do you think? No such sect has really come to prominence as much as some other. What do you think is the reason for that?
See, the sect formation, sects after many medieval sons have been formed, and this process needs to be studied quite sympathetically. As a student of history, I am very sympathetic and conscious of the historical situations which led to the formation of Kabir Panth or Dadu Panth or Sikhism as such and all that. The point, however, is that sometimes it is claimed that Kabir was essentially a dharma guru. And since he was a dharma guru, therefore he is important only as a religious preacher or as the initiator of a new religious tradition. I vehemently disagree with this view. And I can tell you that Kabir did not have any agenda, any intention of establishing any panth or any sect. The example from Anantadas which I gave you, there are other examples also. In fact, in one of the stories, Kabir tells all his disciples to just leave and get out. Because he is getting, their presence is getting too much for him. He is simply not interested. More importantly, and going by the text, I try to count it. You see the word dharma, including its Arabic synonym deen, occurs only 20 times in the entire Kabir Granth. And out of these 20 times, 4 times it is used in the typical Indic sense of the word, that is dharmaraj or dharma kartavya or kshatriya dharma and all that. And rest of the times, the word dharma and deen are used by Kabir almost exclusively to irritate, to teach and to tickle. 100 years after Kabir, the central concern of Tulsidas was jab jab hoye dharam ke hani baade asur adham abhiman, which means that in 15th or 16th century northern India, the word dharma was not unavailable. What happens actually, I'm sorry Sadam, I am taking a bit longer for this because this is a very significant point. What happens when we study the Indian traditions? We think that people who did not know Sanskrit, or who did not know Persian, or who did not know English, knew nothing. So we start treating them either dismissively or condescendingly. Tipania ji is a wonderful singer, Tipania ji is a great man, but well, will he have something to tell us which would be interesting academically and intellectually? After he can't speak single English sentence, he can't speak even proper Kali Hindi. So he is good, we will be touching his feet, we will be very condescending with him, and when he is there, we would be listening to him. But when he is out there having a cup of tea and talking to you, you would be, theek hai. That is the attitude which determines our approach even in the past. So Kabir supposedly did not know any Sanskrit. Kabir supposedly did not know any Arabic or Persian. So well, he did not use the word because probably he did not know that word. My point is that Kabir knew many things, and when you read an absence in Kabir, you should try to read his choice, not his ignorance. You get my point? I am using so many words here and I am not using many words. So since I am speaking in English, so my not using certain words does not indicate my ignorance. It only indicates my choice. But if somebody who is speaking in Hindi or Kannada is not using certain words, then probably it is ignorance. Let us get rid of this attitude in the first place. And if we get rid of this attitude, which I call, to put it very bluntly, colonial attitude, if we get rid of this colonial attitude, then we would realize that there is an element of choice in Kabir. That is why I make this point, that the word dharma was available to Kabir. There must have been some reason that he decides not to use it. Contrast the absence of word dharma in his poetry with the prevalence of bhakti or bhav bhakti in his poetry. I counted the word dharma and I found 20 times. I tried to count bhakti and bhav bhakti. After 3 pages, I left the exercise because it is impossible. On every page, there are at least 50 or 60 times the word bhakti appears. What conclusion I draw from this? That people writing in the medieval India, writing in vernaculars, medieval, or I would like to call it early modern actually, writing in vernaculars, be it Kannada, be it Marathi, be it Hindi, be it Gujarati, I think they were trying to make a distinction between dharma and bhakti. They were trying to make a distinction between dharma and bhav bhakti. Not a separation, not a rupture, but a certain distinction. And therefore, I insist that let us not read Kabir as a dharma. Let us try to read him as a poet. Try.
So I wanted to ask that you were referring to God and truth and Kabir. So something on the lines, can you repeat those, can you recollect those lines that you said that Kabir went out for truth in search of love and God. So something like what is God, what is Kabir, what is truth? Is there any correlation or something you were touching upon it?
Kabir has a certain notion of cosmos. Kabir has a certain notion of God. Kabir has a certain notion of relation with cosmos and God. We do not have sufficient time to discuss those things in greater detail. I can just tell you, Kabir, in the first place, refuses to see God as distinct from cosmos. Kabir's God is not like a headmaster who presides over the universe. He is also not a carpenter who has made something and then is keeping away. In fact, in one of his poems, Kabir says, आए भरे हैं जग जीवन में मैं पाए करत विचारा. When I reflected on the nature of God, I realized that He permeates the entire universe. Jag Jivan. And this adjective, Jag Jivan, the life of universe, is used by Kabir for his God innumerable times in his poems. Second point, as we know, God for Kabir did not signify any avatar, did not signify any historical or mythological figure, though he uses words and names from all the sources, including Islamic ones and not Panthis. God for him implied a certain sense of belonging, a certain sense of rootedness in a certain kind of values. And those values are primarily defined by what I would call prem and jigyasa, love and curiosity, love and intelligence. And that is why, in fact, in one of his poems he says, काम मिलावे राम को जो कोई जाने राह, कबीर बेचारा क्या करे सुखदेव देवे साथ. काम, eros. Eros can take you to God, to Ram, if you only know how to do things, how to maintain it. So that is what I mean to say. Primarily, it is a certain kind of emotional and value structure which Kabir describes by using the words or names like Ram, Govind, Murari, Keshav, Kareem and what.
I found the connection with Marx very interesting. I just wondered if you could explain more what you meant by man's essential nature is spiritual or adhyatmic. What you meant by it precisely I didn't understand. And also how exactly it gets alienated.
Yeah. In fact, this is one question, the implications of which have been bothering me for quite some time. I have been writing on this. Fortunately or unfortunately, I write most of my stuff in Hindi, like Kabir. Unlike Kabir, I know a bit of English. He did not know Sanskrit at all. So, I find it difficult to articulate certain things in English, but anyway. See, what I am trying to say is this. Let me take you back to 19th century, when the term spirituality had not become so popular as an equivalent of adhyatma as it has become now, right? If you look at the Sanskrit-English dictionary of Monier Williams, he defines adhyatma as individuality, self. He does not use the expression spirituality. He uses 10 or 12 definitions for the term adhyatma. And he refers to Bhagavad Gita, which I mentioned, and other references. He defines spirituality as individual, self. So what I am trying to say is this, that let us try to get rid of the spirituality bit of adhyatma and let us try to locate the category of Adhyatma in Indic philosophical and linguistic traditions. That is one. And if you do that, you find that Adhyatma does not necessarily mean something illusory or something outside your experience. It only means a sublimation of your very, very concrete experience. In Indian poetics, Acharya Abhinavagupta, when he describes the aesthetic pleasure, he takes care in distinguishing it from the alaukic. He does not call it otherworldly, he calls it transcending this world, lokottar. So what I am trying to say, my dear friend, is this, that your individuality, yourself, and your attempt of going beyond it, transcending it, relating with the life out there, with the life of community, with the life of cosmos, with the most fundamental questions of existence, to my mind, are all part of your Adhyatmic Vedna, your spiritual anguish. And it is precisely in this sense, to my mind at least, Marx uses the word spiritual essence of human species. This is Marx's expression, not mine. And I would really like to know from you and would like to have a more interactive dialogue with you. Because I do not have answers to all implications and questions of this. But I feel very strongly that the term Adhyatma should refer to our fundamental existential anxiety and agony, and not to something which is rooted in the denial of your political and social and everyday experience. I don't know how far I have been able to clarify, but that is what I can do at the moment.
This is a question to the historian in you, and the most difficult question a historian can be asked is, how do you place ourselves today in history? And whether when we see so much of an attempt to institutionalize the processes of hate and religion, is it a result of an equal amount of people in search of Adhyatma and people who are talking about love, like you and Dipanya and many others? Is it a corollary of that?
You are absolutely right. The most difficult, most loaded and most poignant question. In fact, let me remind you of the title, a most disturbing title of a book which my friend Mark wrote in 2003, or no, before 2003. In fact, he wrote it before 9/11. And the title of the book is Terror in the Mind of God. Not in politics only, not in world only, terror in the mind of God. That, to my mind, describes our predicament in a most dramatic fashion. Even the mind of God has some element of terror. I would think that the return, as they call it, return of organized religion in both good and bad sense. In fact, even today itself, I was reading in the Deccan Chronicle that the most popular TV programs these days, at least in the city of Bangalore, are the morning programs. And the advertisers are queuing up for getting a slot on Bhakti Samachar and Bhakti Sudha and Bhakti that and Bhakti this. This is a revealing image. Sociologically speaking, it's a revealing image. So this return to religion, organized religion, to my mind, is the corollary of following things. One, the failure of the 19th century episteme of scientific rationalism and scientific conceit. Briefly, I am just giving you. Second, it's also a result of the dreams of future turned into nightmares. You see, 20th century has been a century of dreams and it has been a century of nightmares. It has been a century of dreaming a humanity free of all kind of exploitation. And it has been the century of Holocaust and collapse. That is the second thing. The third thing is that we, the intelligentsia or the historians or the philosophers, have failed in our task in realizing that you cannot fight the institutionalization of hatred and aggression unless you explore the possibilities of love, not only as an individual emotion, but also as the basis of some kind of social and political action. And that is why, once again, it's not just a rhetoric, but a heartfelt statement. That is why I salute my friend Swarnam and all of you here. Because I see this precisely as an attempt to institutionalize or to organize the action rooted in the emotion of love, and an attempt of transcending the love as an individual emotion to translate love into a kind of social action. I salute you precisely for this.
I was struck by your observation that Kabir refused to engage in any central way with the word dharma, because in contrast it's a very central word in Bhagavad Gita. And I've always been dharma.
Yeah.
And I've always been troubled by the fact that when Krishna talks to Arjuna, he says one of the factors that determines his dharma is that he is a Kshatriya. And that seems to be a sort of socially imposed, externally imposed notion of dharma. So I was wondering whether, looking at Kabir's refusal to engage with it in a central way, and one possible interpretation is that he rejects that notion of dharma. But is it that he is saying that perhaps you accept dharma, but it has to be filtered through the feeling self, the self that is alive, that is the poet that feels love?
Another icon of my own this thing is Swami Sahajanand Saraswati. Let me tell you about it. That will relate with your question. Swami Sahajanand Saraswati was the founder of All India Kisan Sabha. We could not imagine of Kisan movement in entire India, particularly in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, without Swami Sahajanand Saraswati. And naturally, Swami Sahajanand Saraswati was also a card-carrying member of Communist Party of India. But quite untypically and quite unnaturally, Swami Sahajanand Saraswati was a proper Dandadhari sannyasi also. He was a Shaikh sannyasi, and he never found any contradiction between his being a Shaikh sannyasi and a card-carrying member of Communist Party of India. Most interestingly, and this is something again which I am not making any kind of, please forgive if there is any tinge of irony in this. But one of the ironies of modern intellectual life in India is that we hardly bother to go in for vernacular sources. Not many people outside Hindi-speaking area, and in fact even in Hindi-speaking area, know anything about Swami Sahajanand Saraswati except that he was the founder president of All India Kisan Sabha. The point, however, is that Swami Sahajanand Saraswati wrote a brilliant and scholarly and engaging and revolutionary commentary on Bhagavad Gita. He wrote this commentary in 1942 while he was in Hazaribagh jail. And I say with authority and confidence that if somebody wants to write the history of liberation theology properly, then the birth of liberation theology would be traced back to Sahajanand Saraswati and his Gita Hriday, not to Latin America and the leftist Christian fathers there. Because they became active only in 60. Sahajanand Saraswati was writing his Gita Hriday in 1942. He says the favorite term in Bhagavad Gita actually is not dharma but karma. At every moment, whenever there is a query and the Lord is answering that query, the expression which is most likely to emanate from his mouth is not dharma but karma. This is Sahajanand Saraswati, and I counted, I rechecked, and I actually found that the term dharma has been used only 37 times, not even 42 times in Bhagavad Gita, in the entire text of Bhagavad Gita. Sri Ramanujacharya, in his famous commentary on Bhagavad Gita, describes the 66th sloka of the 18th chapter as the ultimate sloka. the Charam Sloka. It has been described by Ramanujacharya as the Charam Sloka, and it has been accepted after him that yes, it is the Charam Sloka. It is the ultimate statement from the Gita. And what is that statement? Sarvan dharman parityaj mamekam swarnam braj aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma sucha. Forget about all dharmas, discard all dharmas, simply come to me. I assure you, I will ensure your freedom from all the sins. This is the ultimate statement from Bhagavad Gita. So the point I am trying to make is this. We are not discussing Bhagavad Gita, it has its own problems and its own excitements. In the context of Kabir, the point I am trying to make is this, that Kabir is not bothered either about establishing an independent dharma or about entering into an academic discourse on the nature and concept of dharma. He is much more interested in entering into a similar discourse about praxis, which he calls bhakti or bhava.
That is, you had talked about him distinguishing, you feel he felt a conscious need to distinguish between dharma and bhakti. Right? Can you tell us a little bit more about why bhakti and what might have been the historical reason for preferring bhakti over dharma and what that does for him and therefore for us?
Briefly put, the notion of bhakti has, in Indian tradition, has, let us say, 2 or 3 connotations. One would be, let me call it generic notion of bhakti. Devotion or involvement with anything. So you could have Desh Bhakti, you could have Matri Bhakti, you could have Pitri Bhakti, you could have Guru Bhakti. Respect, reverence and devotion to any individual or any tradition or anything is bhakti. That is the generic notion of bhakti. Then you have a certain philosophical and epistemological notion of bhakti, which is explained by a number of Vedanta interpreters as opposed to Shankaracharya, Vaishnavacharyas. They are arguing for bhakti instead of Advaita Vedanta. They are arguing for Visishta Advaita, Dvaita Advaita and everything. The third, and to our discussion, the most pertinent notion is bhakti as a sense of participation. And literally, if you go by the Panini Sutras, actually bhakti literally means that. Both in Panini and Vyasa, the term bhakti has been explained primarily as participation. Therefore, when Panini gives examples of bhakti, on the one hand he mentions Vasudeva. We translate it as devotees of Vasudeva. But in the same explanation, Panini also mentions Mathos, that is people living in the city or region of Mathura, participating in the life. This is something on which I am reflecting, and I do not have a very, cogent, not to talk of final, I do not have a very cogent answer to the fundamental question you have raised, but this is precisely what I am trying to engage with these students, trying to reflect on this. I have a hunch that people like Kabir are insisting on bhakti as opposed to organized religion precisely because they want to evoke this third connotation of the sense of participation. Participation with God, and as a corollary with that participation in the life of community. So that is why he is so insistent on bhakti, and that is why he is so indifferent to dharma. This is my reading.
Okay, we'll take the last question here.
So you asked us to not reduce Kabir to a social reformer, that we should not look at him for dharma and make such as readings of Kabir either. But both of these things, the social reform part of Kabir and the poet part that you seem to profess, both are a result of his spirituality. And it doesn't seem to me that you have a theory of enlightenment or Kabir's spirituality.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
It doesn't seem to me that you have a theory of Kabir's spirituality or of enlightenment that would then explain what are then the byproducts of the initial...
What do you mean by the theory of Kabir's enlightenment?
Well, we don't have a theory of enlightenment.
Why should I have?
You need to have, if you really want to understand Kabir.
I am deliberately provoking you. I want to know, why should I have a theory of Kabir's enlightenment?
If you want to understand Kabir, you need to have one.
Okay, alright. Now I have a theory of Kabir's enlightenment. If I want to understand Kabir, before theory I would propose we should have a method. Otherwise, if you have theory first and go for method or go for text after that, sometimes it so happens that I get a piece of cloth and I want to make a shirt for myself, and my tailor tells me that, look here sir, you need to have 3 meters of clothes for having a shirt for you, and you have got only 2 meters. So the options are that either I buy another cloth, or my tailor, instead of buying another cloth, cuts my body into half. So the point is that before arriving at a theory, let us have a method. My method. I read Kabir first without having any notion whatsoever whether he is a poet or a preacher or a reformer or a revolutionary. I read Kabir or Tulsidas for that matter or anyone in totality. Whatever is available from him in this book or in any other book, I read. I situate him in the historical context of his times so that I do not have unnecessary wild expectations of him. Then I situate myself in my historical context so that I know my limitations and expectations. And then I try to have an interaction with Kabir. This is my method. I do not know whether I arrive at a theory or not. But following this method, I do realize a couple of things. One, for Kabir, I used one expression which probably you miss or whatever. Poetic praxis. For Kabir, the primary thing is bhakti, to my mind, which is his poetic praxis. If you ask him to define himself, he would define himself nothing but as a bhakta. And in fact, at places he dismisses himself as a poet. I do not dismiss him. I cannot dismiss him as a poet. This is sometimes, as they say in Hindi या उर्दू, बड़े कवियों की अदा भी होती है कि वो अपने कवित्व को अंडरलाइन नहीं करते. Okay? So he basically sees himself as a bhakta. He wants to participate in the life of cosmos. He wants to participate in the life of community, and he does in a certain historical context about which he does not speak, about which his times speak, and I read it. Having done all that, I arrive at a conclusion which, if you like, you can call theory. I arrive at a conclusion that Kabir and many like him ought to be read primarily as a poet, primarily as poets. Because, for one, we have no Kabir if we do not have his poems. After all, whatever Kabir we have is only through the language. We have no Kabir if we do not have his poems. Two, as I try to tell you, he seems to be least interested in being a preacher or being a reformer. It's a fallout of his poetic praxis. Please use it by all means. If he is saying something out of his poetic vision or out of his poetic anguish, and if we find it useful for our own political and social projects, why not? We must use it. But we should never forget, we should never lose sight of the fact that here is a poet. And we should not reduce him to something for our convenience. That's all.
You said Kabir is basically a poet of love. And I understand what love should be understood as in the light of poetic praxis. But still, I see a waste in that. People might reduce Kabir to just an escape if we define him as a poet of love.
People might reduce Kabir into a poet of escape only if, again, they read Kabir only in parts, not in totality. My plea is to read Kabir, or for that matter anybody, I repeat anybody, to read and to comprehend him or her in totality. If you read Kabir in totality, it will be difficult to reduce him to a social reformer, to a preacher. By the same logic, it will be difficult, in fact impossible, to reduce him to an essay. If you read him in totality. If you only read poems in which he, in fact in one of his sakis, he says something which would be very, very unpleasant to many of his admirers. Kabir puta Ram ka, motiya mera naam, gale Ram ki jewri, jit mein jit jo. Now this is not at all Kabir the way we understand it. So submissive, so humble, so meek. But this one saki is not the whole Kabir. It is one of them. So my plea, my friend, is to read him in totality. If you read him in totality, this is just by the way. We cannot go into this discussion further. If you read him in totality, then you would also find that on many things, his ideas, his positions, and his obsessions are very, very uncomfortable to most of us. And they ought to be uncomfortable. While answering to this young friend, what I should learn from Kabir, I said, interrogate. In one word, and interrogate means interrogate Kabir also. There are many things about which I would not bother to defend Kabir. There are many things which I know that, yeah, fine, Kabir is saying so, that insists. I do not agree. So the point is that if you read him in totality, if you read him sympathetically, I personally think that the dangers or risks of reducing him to this or that, and also losing an interrogative engagement with him, both the risks are eliminated if you read him in totality, if you read him as a fellow human being, not as a prophet or God or whatever.
If you talk about reading Kabir in totality, how do you reckon with the fact that the oral traditions lead us to a situation where we have no idea of quote-unquote authentic or inauthentic Kabir, and so-called distortions that may creep into the available oeuvre of Kabir's poetry? So when you say we read him in totality, you are reading a lot of Kabir that you may not vibe with. And indeed we do. We all appropriate our own Kabirs. There are some Kabirs I read and I say, you know, this could be his Kabir, and I make my own very feminist Kabir. So a prescription of reading Kabir in totality has to reckon with this reality.
Yeah, that is true. In Indian context, particularly in the context of poetic compositions of people like Kabir, in the first place, we would have to revise our parameters of authenticity. You cannot have anything absolutely authentic in the sense of being penned down by Kabir himself. We do not have a single line about which we could claim that it has come down from Kabir himself, number one. The 15 padas which you have in Fatehpur manuscript, which is supposed to be the oldest manuscript of Kabir, this manuscript was compiled in 1582. Kabir was dead by then at least for 70 years. And that is the oldest you have in Kabir. And that is only 15 padas. And that's all. But then how do you determine? There are many textual criticism methods. I am not going to do that. Tipaniya ji is here. My experience tells me that from Bihar to Gujarat, you can find many ways of Kabir's poetry and performances and retentions. But there is in the oral tradition, there is a base criteria. In Tipaniya ji's region, a song is sung, if I am not wrong, Hari ne aisi rail chalai, ja main baith chalo re bhai. And it is also supposed to be Kabir.
It's Ishwar Das.
Whosoever.
It's another point of the Kabir tradition.
The point I am trying to make is this, that you obviously have padas in which anachronisms occur. But I do not think you will find a Kabir pad in which any oral tradition is upholding the idea of Brahmin supremacy. Or you will not find a Kabir pad in which any oral tradition is upholding the idea of Ved or the Quran being the ultimate source of authority. You will not find. To my mind, that would be the parameter of determining authenticity. I would really not bother myself with determining the actual writings of Kabir, because there are no writings. I just can't find any. There is no point. So I would simply live with the fact that there are multiple voices working in the name of Kabir. And in those multiple voices, you are absolutely right, I will make my choice. And even if I am not making my choice as an objective scholar or as a historian, I would try to find out a different parameter of authenticity. And in this case, this would be that any poem upholding the identity supremacy in any way, or upholding the Vedas or the Qurans at the final word of authority, I would doubt that very much. Because that would go against the very spirit of Kabir, preserved both through the written and the oral.
Thank you very, very, very much.